Timothy's circumcision. Truth number 49. Paul had Timothy circumcised because he wanted Timothy to be Torah compliant. Acts chapter 16, verse 1-3. Then he came to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a certain Jewish woman who believed, but his father was Greek. He was well spoken of by the brethren who were at Lystra and Iconium. Paul wanted to have him go on with him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in that region, for they all knew that his father was Greek. Timothy was circumcised as an adult in Acts chapter 16. This takes place immediately after Paul's confrontation with the Judean Pharisees in Jerusalem and the apostolic decision to allow Gentiles to remain uncircumcised. Luke records that Paul had Timothy circumcised because of the Jews who were in that region. This is an odd occurrence. In light of the verdict of the Jerusalem Council, Paul's strident letter to the Galatians, and Titus's refusal to be circumcised, why would Paul insist on circumcising Timothy? Was Paul being inconsistent? Was he suddenly abandoning the doctrine of justification by faith? There are several theories posed as to why Paul circumcised Timothy. We can rule out with a high degree of certainty that Paul capitulated to the circumcision party. In light of all we know about Paul, there is zero chance of this happening. There are other viable explanations. One theory holds that unbelieving Jews would be scandalized if they knew Paul had an uncircumcised man as a traveling partner. Some speculate that circumcising Timothy was spur-of-the-moment decision done as a favor to the Jews to avoid opposition and the reproach of Paul's countrymen. Another proposes that Paul was being sensitive to Timothy as the weaker brother in Christ. If Timothy wished to cling to all antiquated practice of the Jews, Paul would extend liberty to the weaker faithed brother and not stand in his way. Many draw the conclusion that this was part of Paul's evangelistic strategy. The apostle insisted Timothy adopt the maxim, "To the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews." Uneager to offend his Jewish counterparts, Paul hoped to opportunistically score points with the Jews and heighten his influence among them. One even suggests that Paul wanted Timothy to be like him in his own circumcised state and imbibe the spirit of his mentor. In my estimation, all of these explanations leave something to be desired. Would Paul circumcise another man simply because he was concerned about what other Jews thought of him? Was Paul one to avoid opposition and offense? If circumcision could increase the likelihood of salvation among Jews, shouldn't Paul advocate circumcision for every Christian minister? Did Paul view Timothy as weak in faith? Would an apostle to the Gentiles compromise his convictions to win over the Jews? These explanations leave more questions than answers. There is a more logical explanation for Timothy being circumcised as an adult. Timothy was a Jew. Timothy was the son of a mixed marriage, though some suggest that his parents may not have been married. Timothy's father was Greek, and his mother, Eunice, was a Jew, as was his grandmother Lois. In Judaism, the responsibility of circumcision rests with the father, but because Timothy's father was Greek, Timothy remained circumcised. Being the son of a Jewish woman knowing the Holy Scriptures from childhood, Timothy was likely given a Jewish upbringing and education. It could be that Eunice did not wish to circumcise her son against his father's wishes. Perhaps this is why Timothy remained uncircumcised into adulthood. For all intents and purposes, Timothy was to be considered a Jew. In Hebrew culture, a son received legal entitlements and inheritance from his father, but rabbinic code recognized the child of a Jewish mother as a Jew. David Stem writes, "Jewish and non-Jewish descent are invariably traced through the mother, not the father. The child of a Jewish mother and Gentile father is Jewish, and the child of a Gentile mother and Jewish father is Gentile. If a Gentile mother converts to Judaism, she is a Jew, and her subsequent children are likewise Jewish." Determining Jewish ethnicity through the mother's line can be traced as far back as the 5th century BCE. There is some debate as to whether Timothy should be considered a Gentile. If he was a Gentile, however, Paul's decision to have him circumcised is illogical and suspect. There would be no justification for Paul's actions in light of his position regarding proselyte circumcision. Why not circumcise Titus or any other Gentile Christian for that matter? Paul's decision only makes sense if both Paul and Timothy viewed Timothy as having a claim to Jewish heritage. Because Paul had Timothy circumcised, it is clear that they both considered Timothy a Jew. Paul wanted Timothy to be Torah compliant. It is one thing for a Gentile to be uncircumcised, but quite another for a Jew. God spoke to Israel. Genesis chapter 17, verse 10 to 14. This is my covenant which you shall keep, between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child, who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. An uncircumcised Jew is in violation of the covenant. Paul wanted Timothy to fulfill the Torah as a descendant of Abraham. It is not clear as to why Timothy had delayed his circumcision up to this point in his life. Perhaps his father had recently died, or the occasion to travel with Paul presented the opportunity. What is clear is that Paul had Timothy circumcised because of the Torah, not in spite of it. Timothy was put forth as a teacher of the law. As Paul's co-laborer, Timothy's authority to teach would have been met with objection, as it is a reproach for a Jew to be uncircumcised. All the Jews in that region knew that Timothy's father was Greek and that he was uncircumcised. Bringing Timothy along with him could hinder Paul's ministry and impede his ability to proclaim the gospel to the Jew first. By being circumcised, Paul and Timothy would be given a place to teach in the synagogues. Conclusion. When considering Timothy's circumcision and Titus's non-circumcision, there is no inconsistency in Paul's position. Titus was a Gentile. Timothy was a Jew. Whereas Timothy had biblical reasons to be circumcised, there was no biblical obligation for Titus. Paul's commitment to the Torah is resolute. He does not instruct Titus to remain uncircumcised. He simply states that Titus was not compelled to be circumcised at the insistence of the troublers. Timothy, on the other hand, was circumcised at Paul's insistence. Whether he took him to a mohel or performed the circumcision himself, Paul is directly responsible for Timothy's circumcision. Apparently, Paul was not fundamentally opposed to adult circumcision.